So for page 10, we're going to talk about functions. One of the things that we talk about when we look at functions is the domain and range of a function. And the domain, there's a couple different ways to think about it. You can think about it as the input values. You could think about it as all possible x values. And if you have it on a graph, you think about where is the graph defined on the x-axis. Like if I look up and down the x-axis, where is there a graph if I look up or down? So like 5 is not in the domain here of this line, because if I go to 5 and look up or down, I don't see a graph. You know, anything out here is out of the domain. Anything over here is out of the domain. But if I go right in here, I can look up and I can see a graph. So I would say the domain goes from here to here, which is -3 to 2. There's a couple different ways to write that. I'm going to write D for domain. First is this kind of bracket notation. X is between -3 and 2. Another way you might see it is interval notation. And those are just either parentheses or brackets. Brackets would be if it's equal to, parentheses would be if it's just less than. And that's one way to write domain. Range are the output values. And this would be all possible y values. So we'll do the same thing here, but here we'll go along the y-axis, and if you look left or right and you don't see a graph, you're not in the range. So like up here, nothing. Down here, nothing. But if you go from 1 to maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly. It's hard to kind of see on this graph where it is, but I'll say 1 to 4. If you go from 1 to 4, you look over and you do see a graph. So the range, you can write it like this. You write the smaller number first, 1 to 4. And I write a y in the middle here because we're dealing with y values. Here I write an x in the middle because we're dealing with x values. Or I could write it in interval, interval notation. That's my range. All right, next. Function, or relation versus function. A relation is only a set of ordered pairs. And they can be anything. A function is specific. It is a set of ordered pairs where, and here's where it gets specific, each x has exactly one y. So we'll look at that definition more down here. Function notation, when you see function notation, it's y notation would be y equals something. Function notations when you have f of x equals something, or here you have f of 3 equals 5. Well, f of 3 equals 5 just means that the x coordinate is 3 and the y coordinate of that is 5. So you could also write it like 3, 5. So that's function notation for that. All right, vertical line test. So vertical line test works because if you pass, that means every time you do a vertical line, you only hit the graph once. Every time you do a vertical line, you only hit it once. If you fail, that means for x equals -2 in this case, there are 2 y values. There's a point up here and a point down here. That means you fail the vertical line test. That means if I say x equals -2, you could say, well, we could be up here or we could be down here. It's not clear. There's not exactly one y. So that's when you fail. It's when you hit it twice or more than once, so you're not exactly sure where you should be. There's more than one y for that x.